Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.
Hey y'all, Dave Mopper here. Welcome in. This pod is a compilation of lessons in fatherhood and leadership. I'm using it to explore the path to raising legends, and I'm sharing it all with you. Each episode provides a really raw and unique perspective on fatherhood, and it's what I've come to love about these conversations. There is something for every father who's in growth mode. All right, enjoy the combo. Mr. Eric Wilson, welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad.
That is a name, brother. It even rhymes. I like it.
Yeah, man. Little jingle in
What's
there.
happening, man?
So yeah, I mean, life is good. I'll tell you what, just being a fresh dad, all these little new things. We've got my youngster on a bike, a little Strider bike as of this weekend, like an actual bike. We had an introductory level Strider that was plastic. It kind of stood up on its own. Now he's got a bona fide Strider, and he cannot get enough of bikes. He woke up this morning and said,
Bike.
"I bike." He goes,
Uh-huh.
I bike. And then he
That's
went
awesome.
down for a nap, and he woke up from that nap asking, I bike. So we're in the thick of the summertime, early summertime, but
Yeah.
bike season.
What's the weather like out
Good.
there right now?
It's gorgeous. Colorado's, ebbing and flowing between a little bit of rain, a lot more rain than we should normally have, I suppose. But as they say, we really need the moisture. And
That's good. That's good for elk. I
yeah,
like that. I mean, that means good antler growth in the fall.
true. It is true. And that's interesting because they're fueling up on all these lush nibbles
all
in
the
the
greens.
woods, and then yet the catch-22 here, because it does get dry and a lot of fuel for fires in, you say,
That is
August.
true.
And so there's people saying, oh, we've had almost too much rain, being that,
Too much growth. We don't need that much growth, right?
yeah, I loved
What's
it.
the temperature?
I mean, it's 70, 75 today, maybe. It's pretty
It
nice.
was 92 yesterday
Yeah,
and really humid. We're in the middle of summer. It's happening.
indeed. And remind me, I know you're East Coast, but North Carolina, I want to
South
say.
Carolina.
South Carolina.
Mhm.
There we
I'm
go.
actually at our place in North Carolina today, but our house, we live in South Carolina.
Well, it is. So, Eric, thanks for making time for me as a fresh father seeking wisdom, and anyone
Glad to
else
be here,
listening
brother.
in. Yeah, I mean, I know you've
You
got
can have
such
what little I have.
yeah. I appreciate the humility. Whether you know it or not, you've got such a good story, and I've appreciated hearing about it. Just the initial moments was through the Apogee community, and you were sharing your story, a bit of a rehab of your body, which resonated with me, a bit of an outdoorsman, a woodsman, an elk hunter. You're hunting probably all sorts of good stuff. So that resonated with me. You've built a number of businesses, by the way, with not just a partner, not just any partner, but your life partner. Your wife and you are in business together. So there's something powerful and unique about that. And
Yeah.
then you have four young but adult nonetheless, adult children. And so you're
That's
on,
correct.
I'm looking down the path of fatherhood, and I don't know, I can kind of see you way out there.
Yeah,
And
it's a long
I
way
just,
away, but it'll get there fast,
yeah. So,
really fast.
well, I
So enjoy
appreciate
the
you.
bike.
Yeah, I appreciate you jumping in and sharing some just anecdotes. We'll let the audience find the wisdom in all your stories.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about you and your wife being in business together. Tell us about that business, but more importantly, like, how do you build such a powerful dynamic between not just your best friend, you might say, your lover, your life partner, but someone who you can actually navigate business with? Is it all complementary, or did you actually have to do something different to somehow capitalize on the business side of a partnership?
Yeah, I would say so. It's an evolution, right? And it's looked different at different points along the way. We met at the same company at the time. This is when we were actually employees 25 years ago. And she lived in Missouri at the time. I lived in South Carolina. We were both I think I was divorced and she was in the middle of going through a divorce. Um, and we got to know each other through just work. We had been selected to go up to, I think we were in a company of about, we were both in sales. There was about 800 sales reps across the country. And they had this class 3 times a year where they picked 10 to 15 people that they identified as their top like management candidates. And so we both had gotten selected to go to one of these, and they took you up there for 3 weeks, put you through all kinds of intense training, this kind of stuff. And then the last week, they put you in all these role play scenarios, literally for 8 hours a day, all different management scenarios where you had to make decisions, coach troubled employees, try to hire somebody that wanted to go work somewhere else. And in all those scenarios, they had a consulting company that was a psychiatrist who evaluated everything you did. And then at the end of the week, they gave you a raw score. And the funny part about the whole thing was at the end of the week, she and I had the 2 highest scores that had ever come out of this evaluation in like, I think 10 years of them doing it. And she always tells this story because I think I was like 0.2 higher than her. And I don't ever say anything about it, but she's always like, I'm pretty sure they did the math wrong. So, but I remember when I first met her, like it was the first day of the whole thing. And I was sitting, it was kind of like an L-shaped table. I was sitting here, she was over there, and we had to each go around and not just introduce ourselves, but we had to like, they told us ahead of time, you have to talk about yourself for like 3 to 5 minutes. And I remember her standing up and talking. And I remember as I listened to her, I literally was thinking, yeah, she's beautiful, but she might be one of the smartest like people I've ever met or seen or been around. And that was the thing that like knocked me over about her early, is her intelligence. And then as I got to know her capability, and the way that we really got to know each other from a professional standpoint was there was no training that had been put in place or preparation program that had been put in place for this. They called it remap. And so some people showed up super prepared if their manager had done some work with them. Some people showed up with no preparation. And she and I were talking one day, and we're like, there really should be some kind of a standardized, preparation for this so that people all come in on the same foot. Because some people maybe really have a lot of innate qualities, but they're not being prepared for it. And then they come up and don't perform as well. And then they get, basically put on the back burner for management opportunities. So we proposed this to the executive, team and said, hey, could we write a training schedule for remap so that managers could, be uniform in terms of the way they get people ready, and then present it to you. And they were like, sure, they probably didn't think we'd ever do it. And so we spent the next 6 months virtually, and this was before Zoom or any of that stuff, right? It was all on the phone, going back and forth on phone calls and writing this thing. And, she had a really finite attention to detail, and I'm a big picture guy, kind of visionary guy. And so we really complemented each other in terms of the way that we thought about things and put things together. And then at our national meeting that following summer, we had told them, hey, it's done. And they're like, okay, we're going to give you 30 minutes to present it to the president, the founder, the vice president, like all the executive team. And this thing happened that became this like running thing in our family that happens to this day. We were about to go out and present it, and she was super nervous, like really nervous. I don't get that nervous around that stuff because of my background in coaching and football, and I'm kind of just used to doing that stuff. And I could tell she was like super uptight. And we were right about to go out, and I took her by the shoulders and I looked at her. I said, hey, and she thought I was going to say something super profound to her. I said, don't screw it up. And she just started laughing her ass off. Right. And it kind of cut the tension, and we went out there and we, kicked butt. And they ended up taking that and implementing it nationwide across like the whole company. But to this day, like if our kids have something really big that they're doing, and we've done this their whole life that they're nervous about, like right before they're about to do it, we'll go, hey, don't screw it up. And now it's like a family thing. So that's how we met, and that's how we, kind of first got to know each other. And then after we had spent all that time writing that thing, we started kind of dating long distance. We did that for a year and a half. decided, after a while, hey, we wanted to get married. She moved down to South Carolina, couldn't get a transfer, took a job with a different company, which gave us kind of an entree into a different field in medicine where she got a lot of knowledge. We ended up buying a medical practice that she had some familiarity with 3 or 4 years later. This was kind of our foray into entrepreneurship. It was struggling. It was a cash pay practice. They really didn't know how to run the business. The doctor wanted out. She came home and said, hey, I think we could buy this business for like less than $100,000. She just wants like out of it. And I said, okay, what's the plan? So we sat there and brainstormed it for probably a week. And then we said, all right, let's go do it. There was a lot of marketing and like customer relation stuff involved. There was a lot of like, okay, how do you go get somebody? How do you market to somebody? All stuff that we knew how to do from our job at our other companies. And we thought that if we could just learn the interior piece and have good medical personnel, we could kind of figure out the rest, which we did. We took a business that was like, doing $300,000-$400,000 a year, and we turned it into a $2.5 million a year practice within about 2 years. We sold that, and then we went and started a bigger one with a surgery center attached to it up in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we built that, and then we started adding doctors to it, and over time, it grew and became one of the busiest one of those in the Carolinas. And then some companies that we were clients of, and we purchased we purchased supplies from them. We were growing really fast while the rest of the market was kind of stagnant. And so one of these big national companies, the president had, people weren't buying as much of their product because the clients were struggling, the practices were struggling. So he came in one day with, asked if he could come visit. He was out in California. Asked if he could come spend the day with me, and he did. And we sat down, and he kind of wanted to know what we were doing. And then at the end of the day, he said, would you be open to doing some consulting work for us? He goes, I don't even know what that would look like, but I'd really like to help our practice, our clients' practices grow and benefit from some of the stuff you've been doing. And I said, let me think about it. So I ended up doing it, and I ended up doing, I think, 10 practices for them, where I kind of, did a 18-month engagement and consulting. And then that ended up becoming a thing that had a life of its own. And so in 2016, we sold the surgery center, we sold the medical practices. And that's all I've been doing since then, is I basically work with surgeons all over the country on putting together their business plan, everything from doing a demographic study to finding the right location to put their practice, working with the architect to build it right, hiring key staff, and then putting marketing plans in place and customer acquisition plans, and basically just helping them start and grow their business. So, full business development consulting. And that's what I've been doing for 9 years.
All right. Okay.
And,
That's
and
like,
my wife.
yeah.
So to unpack the whole thing, my wife and I worked together the entire time up until we sold that practice. And then she had a really big interest in real estate, and she went and got a real estate license, sold for a little while, was really good at it, but couldn't stand it. And now what she does is she buys old houses, renovates them, and then resells them. So she kind of has her own thing, and I kind of do my own thing, but we cross over sometimes. If I need help, she'll come help me. And if she needs help, I'll go help her.
Amazing.
So,
I can see the complementary nature of where you're at with it too. And I mean, there's so many, I don't know, hopefully the themes are popping
long
through.
story, I know.
No. This was great because there's so many themes of fatherhood and leadership and a growth-minded approach to things that I want to tease out. But I do have a question just right off the bat.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy more? And I was kind of giggling in my head. I'm picturing like suit and tie Eric Wilson, or at least, jacket, probably like in front of a client from time to time. Maybe it's casual. I don't know. But just like dialed in professional Eric Wilson, and then just like lethal bow hunter, camoed up, like,
That
right?
guy.
So you like yeah, I was gonna say, which is your preferred
Yeah.
mode?
Yeah, the second
had-
guy. I've actually am like in the infantile stages of a new business
Hmm.
that complements my wife's business. I've got a good friend of mine who was in the coaching profession for a long time. And he has started a company where he's doing some spec houses and stuff like that, but he's also done some land investing. And I'm really interested in the land component. And so we're actually have been out for the last probably month looking at raw land that we could potentially buy and, you know, divide out, develop, and then sell to builders, sell to individual people who want to build, you know, mini farms and stuff like that, 5 acres, and really get into understanding land development, not building so much, but just the development of raw land, which I just, as I've gotten more and more, you know, into the outdoors and really, you know, embrace the, you know, that lifestyle, I just love being outside all the time. And that's probably the biggest thing that I don't love about what I do right now is being on conference calls all day long. And, you know, all I want to do is be out in the woods. So I'm like,
Yes.
I want to do, you know, more of that. And so I'm really excited about that because I kind of been looking at that as maybe 5 to 8 years from now when I, you know, potentially retire from when I'm doing this, I would like that to be kind of my next story.
I can see that fitting. That yeah, the future vision is lots of good stuff in that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I'm hearing all this, and I, you know, frankly, we're becoming we're newly acquainted friends, so it's good to hear this about you, and it has me just wondering, like, what is your guiding North Star, or the kind of the ultimate thing that you're going for that has, because I'm just hearing, you know, you seize the moment, so to speak, with the connection with your wife. Then that was in the midst of seizing an opportunity to refine a business system and create the onboarding and the uniformity and getting people, you know, set up for
Mm-hmm.
success. You saw market opportunities together, and now you've parlayed that into a bigger coaching business, right? And then what we're getting to, there's some really great stories. You have adult children who are all equally um, motivated. It sounds like they've got conviction. You within your story, I'm hearing there's a personal responsibility, but there's also taking initiative as one of the most fundamental things that there possibly is in
Mm-hmm.
the world.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm kind of curious how you feel you've achieved all that. Was there one particular thing you've always had your heart or your mind on that helped, that was your guiding light, so to speak? What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, from a guiding light perspective, that's different around my life. That's my faith. But when it comes to the business side of things, I think for me, it's probably just always been that I've been too stupid to realize that what I may be taking on is like a lot to bite off.
Okay. Yeah.
And, you know, and just going, and I think probably that kind of comes from a level of confidence that I developed, um, you know, through being an athlete when I was young. And then from when I was, you know, I coached college football as a profession for close to 10 years. And I was able to coach at a really high level. And so pretty young, I accomplished some things that were really hard to accomplish that a lot of people could not. And it gave me a sense of confidence that I could kind of tackle anything. And so I don't think there's ever been a time that I've been faced with something that I was like, I want to go do that, that I thought I can't do that. It's always been more like, how do I go do that? And then sometimes I'll end up looking at it and going, okay, I don't really want to do that, but I've never had something in front of me that I've said, I can't accomplish that. I just have to figure out how. That's always how my brain has worked, is I just have to figure out how to do it. And I think that probably has been the biggest thing for me. Like, as I've done whatever I've done and whatever I've accomplished, it's always been a willingness to take something on and an unwillingness to say, I can't do that.
Hmm. I mean, name that for me. What is that? What characteristic is that is it confidence, or is it competence? Like, maybe it's different, but is it something else that we can just name if it's not
I
those
mean,
two?
I think it's both, right? I think it's a confidence in your own competency.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's a belief in yourself that if you gain the right knowledge, you can do it. You can
Yes.
figure it out, right? The bow hunting thing is the exact same thing. I mean, I spent 30 years on a football field every fall. I was not a hunter
Mm.
until like 3 years ago, and then I was like, I'm gonna go figure out how to bow hunt. And I still like am a total amateur at it, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I know more than I knew 3 years ago. But I mean, most people would be like, what? I mean, most people have been hunting since they were a kid. Their dad taught them, and my dad didn't hunt. I didn't get raised that way, but I just have always. I think the other thing, Dave, that I like is I like doing stuff that's really hard. I really like to challenge myself both physically and mentally, and I like to push myself past boundaries that the normal person would be like, that's a little too much.
But bear with me, Eric, though.
Yeah.
Why do you like to do hard things? What's the layer deeper that knowing yourself after these all these decades? It's like,
hmm
what drives you to do hard things?
there's just a sense. I mean, for me, I think there's a sense of accomplishment that comes with it that I don't gain from anything else. There's there's a feeling of, for me, when I set something, I'm going to do X, and it might take me 2 years to do X, right? But the daily act of just like chopping wood and
Mm,
getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer, like I love that grind of knowing that I'm willing to do something every day that most people are not. I'm willing to get up at 4:45 in the morning and get a jump on the things I have to do, like do my Bible study. I'm be done training by 7 o'clock so that I can get after whatever I have to do professionally. Like I just love the process of testing myself.
mm,
Like that's the biggest thing that I can say is just that it's not even like, yes, I like the outcome. That's great, but I like the struggle.
mm. There we go. You like the struggle, for sure.
hmm
There's
Yeah,
lessons in there. There's like, I don't know, there's something about, there's certainly wisdom and lessons in the struggle. There's also, you wonder about the world in 20 years and AI and just what is reality going to be. But the struggle is where life is lived, so to speak.
if you choose it, right? I think there's so many people who choose not to do that, who shrink from that, and those are. And I'm not saying that from a standpoint of judgment, right? I'm saying that I think you talked about this earlier before we were even online. Was like, how do we raise warriors, right? How do we raise adults that are going to be capable, both in their families, professionally, physically, all those things. And I think part of that is you have to teach your kids how to
Mm,
struggle well, and to embrace that process and recognize that anything that's great is going to require that. And the people who aren't willing to do that, who have been whatever coddled their whole life or just didn't have a role model that taught them that, like those are the people that when they hit a certain point they stop. Either they don't know what to do or they don't have enough confidence in themselves to push themselves past the knowledge barrier, and to go figure it out. There's a lot of different reasons, but that's, to me, I think the biggest difference between people that are successful. There's a lot of definitions for that, right? But I don't care what definition you use. I think the biggest difference between people who you look at and go, man, how did that person achieve that? Whether it's fatherhood or their business or something performance based, and the person who just kind of gets along every day is a lot less about skill and ability and a lot more about the willingness to struggle every day to get there.
mm. So it truly is a more of a mind over matter kind of thing. It's attitude, and largely living a fulfilled, full, robust life is largely right up here.
I believe so. Yeah.
Well, and then I'm thinking, so you told me this story, and I'll give the short version and expand where it would be useful for the listeners, but I want to get at the question. You have, was it your 19-year-old daughter, I believe you were saying, right? Who's
Hmm.
building the
Yeah.
home, trying to sort out the young life situation, and
Right.
you're helping her with a real estate play to afford some community gathering space. And of course, it had to be profitable. It couldn't, you,
Sure. Yep.
you had to assess the business side of it, but then also the bigger side of it. Either way, you're in discussion supporting your daughter that way. She had she had to have gone through struggle to see opportunity. I feel like that once you look at struggle a certain way and you embrace it, then you could see opportunity. Otherwise, resistance and friction, it's hard to see opportunity when struggle's winning. So you have to
Hmm.
embrace struggle, and then that actually creates clarity, perhaps, or widens your aperture to see opportunity. So the
Right.
question I'm going to get at is, how did you equip your daughters and your sons to have um, resilience through struggle? But I just wanted to acknowledge that she could see that there was a need in the community. So you've already instilled kind of this service mindset, business opportunity mindset, resourcefulness. Like, I don't know what it's going to take to find a piece of property like this, Dad, but can we at least explore it? So there wasn't a lot of people will just be like, I don't even know where to start,
Hmm.
and they just quit. And
Yeah.
and then the almost this yes and mentality you've instilled in her, and even how I wonder how she thinks of you as dad, just as a constructive partner in some things here. So I suppose, saying all that, here's the question: how you've got four kids that are young adults. Uh, I'm sure they're different, each of them in their certain ways, but
Yeah.
how did you set them up for success? Where was the struggle that you put them in, maybe consciously? Could have been sports, could have been projects. What was the struggles they found inherently in their own lives being kids that you helped them navigate to embrace this notion of teach your kids how to struggle well? What did that look like for some of your kids? Maybe your 19-year-old to start off with.
Yeah. So I think it was a big learning curve for us. Um, I think we got better at it with each kid as they went along. Um, I think my oldest son, who he's 31, and when he was young, his mom did not really want to make him struggle in most cases. She kind of wanted to fix things for him. And that ultimately made things a lot more difficult for him. It took him a lot longer to figure it out because he had always kind of tried to solve the problem, relieve the stress, take the struggle away, right? As opposed to making him work through it. And ultimately it took him much longer as an adult to get to the point where he became capable of doing that. And as they got older, or excuse me, as we raised, more kids, he kind of, we both kind of did this, right? Because I was on the opposite end of the spectrum. I was a total hard ass, like super rigid about everything, which was not good for him either, because then, he had one person telling him everything's okay, and he had another person telling him, you're not doing anything right. And there was a lot of anger and stuff in there, during his teenage years. And things are really, really good now. But what I recognized, as we raised our kids was that I needed to be better at recognizing when to be hard and when to be compassionate. And she needed to do a better job of being much more consistent with the expectations, on our kids, and not giving them a reason why, not doing something was okay or solving their problems. Um, and so that's what we've done better as we've raised our kids. And that's kind of where I think my youngest daughter, she's had the benefit of the mistakes that we made with, our kids, our older kids, as they grew up. And she's also had the benefit of watching us for the longest time. Right. So when we got married, we're a mixed family. So our oldest was 8 and then 6. And then I had a really young child. And then, our baby wasn't even born yet, obviously. And so we were still employees up until, our older kids, I think, were middle school, high school, right? So they didn't get to see nearly as much of the entrepreneurship and that kind of stuff in our life as our two younger kids have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so they think differently than our two older kids. Now our older kids are getting there because we've kind of tried to bring them back in as adults and teach them things. But you know, when they're older, they want to make their own mistakes and they're not as malleable. And when they're younger, the more that they can see happen, the more that they kind of naturally will replicate, especially if it's positive. And then the other thing that's kind of funny is my youngest daughter always says, I always kind of marvel at the decisions she makes because she's so mature and thoughtful about everything. And she's like, well, I just look at what, you know, Grant and Lindsay did, and I do the opposite. Because they're in a good position now, but they made some bad decisions and learned some hard lessons, you know, in their 20s.
I mean, there's always the little inside jokes and rivalries. So that I'm sure that's
Yeah.
said with love in a way, but I could see, yeah. So in a way, as you were describing all this, I'm going, you know, sometimes parents are just doing the best they can, and that's what you were doing,
We're
right?
people.
Yeah,
No, I mean, yeah.
So I suppose, have you ever had that conversation with your oldest to sit down and say, hey,
Hmm.
you know, at a certain point, we were just doing the best we can. I think we set you up for some success, but by the way, it's up to you. Like
Yeah. Yeah, I have.
eventually,
No, I've
eventually
actually
we all take.
apologized. I've apologized to him before. Like I've said to him, you know, hey, I know that it was probably really hard on you, you know, coming into a situation, you know, with a stepdad in the house, even though your dad lived close by. It was hard for me because I, you know, didn't have a big family, and all of a sudden I had three kids.
Mm,
Um, and I said, you know, I recognize like that I did not have the right amount of patience. Probably I didn't have probably the right amount of compassion, and so I've apologized to him. I said like I probably wasn't very good, you know, for a while, and I'm trying to be a lot better, you know, with you as an adult. And he said, you know, hey, look, I was probably really angry, and I probably didn't make it easy on you. And I recognize that parents are people, which is hard for kids to recognize until they get to a certain age. You know, they kind of just think you're their parents. They don't recognize that you're a person that goes through all the same stuff they do. Um, but yeah, we have like now it's interesting because we have a great relationship, you know. But it's because we're really honest with each other. We don't pretend that something happened that didn't happen or pretend that nothing happened. We're just honest about what it was and that we were both trying to do the best we could at the time.
that that moment where you realize, well, I was thinking about this too because I'm in my mid 40s having my first kid. At
Yeah.
44 now, he's 20 months, so people can kind of do some math there. My dad, when he was 40, I was 12. He had me when he was 28.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking when I was coming up on 40, and this is before I even had a kid, like, oh, my dad's world. Well, for one, it's just crazy to contrast my dad and me because he's my dad. I'm going to contrast myself against him. Not many other guys would I compare myself to, but I was there. I was just thinking, huh, wonder
Hmm.
different lifestyles. And then to realize at 40, and this is 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, that I was still such a work in progress. I was still sorting my, best practices out and, pursuing things and failing and learning. And it was a mess.
Hmm.
It's still a mess in a good way. But now,
Yeah.
and that, oh, when I was 12, my dad was, maybe he had a little bit better handle on things, or maybe he just had his own, but he still was just as human as I am today at 40. And I never
Yeah.
realized that. So having kids will put that front and center on you, and you
For sure.
puts everything into perspective. So becoming a father, did it change how you interacted with your parents or other mentors in your life, grandparents or aunts and uncles? What was the shift for you, if you recall?
You know, my grandparents died when I was um, a younger adult. You know, I really wish that they had lived longer. I did not appreciate what they brought to the table as people, um, as a young man, and I would love to sit down with my grandfather like today and have conversations with him. Like that would just that's one of the probably one of the biggest things that I think about on a fairly regular basis of, man, that was a wasted opportunity. Now he lived about 8 hours away, but we went there like pretty regularly, and I would spend weeks there in the summer. He was a farmer, really quiet guy, so you kind of had to talk to him to get him to talk. But yeah, I wish I had a, had appreciated what my grandparents could have brought to the table, at the time. It definitely impacts the way I think about my parents, and the fact that they're people, not my parents necessarily. And and they had 3 boys who were all, lunatics.
Raising
So
hell. Yep.
yeah, that's exactly right. But yeah, it definitely gives you a different perspective, on your own folks when you get to a certain age.
Well, and I'm in a spot too, thinking about how to, as you said, being intentional about the role of fatherhood, and thinking about what does it mean to raise my son a certain way versus just winging it and being arbitrary
Yeah.
about it. And then I'm kind of going up the chain of command. It's like, uh, I want to raise him in such a way that I'm proud of him, or that I'm impressed by him, maybe. And then I want my dad to be proud or impressed, as though, okay, those are my genetics, blooming into existence, and they're doing well. And then I even think about my grandfathers, um, and my grandparents, my mom, my grandma, my great grandma, grandmas. It's like, are we? This just was a litmus test for me that struck me, also within the realm of apogee too, just being intentional. But I was like, am I living in such a way where my grandparents would be like, nice work,
Hmm.
right? Like, isn't that kind of a good way to just evaluate what you're doing with this one life to live? Like, considering, and you can do the math, you can go back a couple generations, there's, how many people it took for you to exist, right? Just
Yeah,
a few
pretty
generations
cool.
past, you're like, holy crap. And I'm I'm them in perpetuation. Are they stoked about how I'm adding value to the world, or, whatever?
Hmm.
It's kind of fun. And to know who my grandparents actually are, to answer that question. I've been doing deep dives with my parents, a little bit about my grandparents, and there's a recent book that came out about a World War II bombing in Germany in 1945, that my grandfather was on. He was a navigator on a B-24 bomber,
That
and
that's super cool.
like the chances that he lived, by the way, like the story, that
Like
the
minuscule.
minuscule,
Yeah,
and
right.
there's probably some lore in the
Hmm.
story too, but
Right.
the fact is he was definitely facing life or death situations, and then he made it back, and of course he lived his life, and here I am. So just to be here talking to you in this moment, because
Hmm.
of all that, it just it just gives a lot of meaning and clarity for me, that that's been striking me in this new role. So, being intentional, seizing the moment, being purposeful as a father. Do you feel like along the way for your 4 kids, and I appreciate the different dynamics, right? You have some kids that you're now a steward or a shepherd of them, but they weren't your kid. Say,
Hmm.
they're not your biological kid, but you've got to build that rapport. And then you end up having, was it you had one together? Is that right?
Hmm. That's
So
right.
then,
Yeah.
were there things that you and Lauren thought, okay, gosh, the world's going to be messy, or we're not going to be perfect parents, but at least let's make sure they appreciate the struggle, they know how to struggle well, and that they are A and B and C? Were there other things that you named or that you had on your mind throughout the last 25 to 30 years?
Yeah. I mean, we always wanted, to raise them, um, eh, with our hope that they would grow up with, with a faith in Jesus Christ and a love for the Lord. And they've all kind of had their own journeys through that, but that was probably the number one thing for us, was like, we wanted to expose them to that. Ultimately, it's it's every person's individual choice, whether they, accept Jesus as their savior or not. But we wanted to model that and talk to them about it enough that that was a big part of, a window that they could choose. So I would say that was probably number one. Number two was self-sufficiency, and just, we never pushed them towards doing a specific thing, any of it. We were very tried to be very thoughtful about, letting our kids kind of choose their own path, as long as it, stayed within the framework of a few things. Like, we wanted them to be honest. We wanted them to be willing to work hard at whatever they chose to do, not take shortcuts, not compromise, the struggle. That was a huge part of it. And then, we always said to each other, like, our goal is not to be our kids' friend. Obviously, we want our children to like us, but our ultimate, task as parents is to raise good citizens, good adults, good husbands, good fathers, good wives, good mothers. That's ultimately, like, if you look at, and we used to say this when they were younger, if we look at them in 20 years, what is our measure of success? And that's always what we said was, if we raise good adults who are loving and have good families and contribute to society and are capable people, then we've done a good job as a parent.
No doubt. Now I don't know, that seems obvious to me, and we're in the nature of this conversation brings us together, and it's no surprise that we both appreciate that. How much of
Sure.
the population out there is conscious about the role of fatherhood, the role of motherhood, to that level where they're saying, well, we want to have value added members of society, and I have to take full responsibility as a parent, and I have to take agency, and it's freaking hard. It's, balancing jobs and relationships and pursuing entrepreneurship and overcoming adversity and raising a kid in these particular times with, uh, seems like social media is a nuance, and maybe the world's just a little bit spun up more than it ever has been. It's like, how how many people are just trying to get through another day?
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably are, um, but I think, one of the biggest things is, we, just like you're trying to be intentional with your child, right? With it's it's hard to think like that every day. But I think the biggest difference in what a lot of people do in the world today versus, like, people that maybe think more like you and I, is there's so many people who are doing the opposite of teaching their kids how to struggle. They're trying to take that completely away from their kids. They're trying to make everything simple. They're trying to remove any sense of difficulty from their life. They're trying to fix everything. If a teacher calls home and says, so and so, did X in class today, their first response is, well, they probably had a reason to do that, and ends up being mad at the teacher.
Mm.
I think there's so much of that, and just not teaching any personal accountability to our kids. And I think part of that probably started with our parents' generation, like, my grandparents were really tough. My dad was pretty tough. My mom kind of, she babied, like, when I look at the way she was with me versus the way she was with my younger brother, she, like, really babied my younger brother. And you can see how he turned out versus, like, in terms of where I am in my life, And so I think there's a lot of that, is just not teaching our kids how to struggle, and trying to take everything that's hard out of their lives. And what do you get when you get an adult like that? When you teach a kid that they deserve everything that they want, that they shouldn't have to work hard for anything they want, and that anytime something hard comes up, I'm going to fix that problem for you. You raise an adult that is completely incapable of doing anything, is totally selfish, and thinks that anytime something hard happens, somebody should solve that problem first. And they're incapable of being productive in any way, shape, or form in our society.
Well, and isn't that interesting? I mean, what kind of store is 7-Eleven?
Do what? Oh, the convenience store. Yeah. Right.
Convenience. It's like
Mm-hmm.
convenience is everywhere. In fact, you make it more convenient for your clients to run a business. So oftentimes business is simplifying or creating convenience
Hmm.
for an audience or a need. But it almost
Right.
has, it's gone too far. We live in this world where there's so much convenience that we're now trapped in convenience. And then especially when we raise kids without any adversity, and then they're in this world that's built, it's like it's built, it could come crashing down and convenience could disappear, by the way. But
Hmm.
it's a house of cards of convenience in a sense that we're all kind of just, not all of us, obviously. I feel like there are capable people out there who stay sharp in case the convenience goes away,
Yeah.
or cape. But it does feel, or is this intentional? Like this world we're living in, have we been lured to raise kids through convenience and to kind of depend on convenience? Do you feel like we're going to have a hard awakening someday? I mean, get
I
real
think
with
that's
me.
starting to. I think it's starting to happen, like already for some people, right? I mean, if you look at that documentary that came out a couple of years ago, The Social Dilemma. You seen that?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So if anybody's seen that, they recognize the dangers of social media, not just the dangers of, oh, there's predators out there, but what it actually does to your brain, all that stuff. Um, when we were raising our kids, we did not recognize, like, my two older kids, Facebook was like just becoming a thing when they were in high school. And then my two younger kids, it was like Instagram was just becoming a thing when they were in like middle school and high school. But there wasn't all this professional realization from a consensus of people that this is really bad for our kids, right? If I was raising a kid now, they would not get a smartphone until they were probably like close to graduating from high school. I would give them a flip phone so that they could call us and be in touch with us and whatever, but they would not get a smartphone early. Like in middle school or something, like I did with my other kids. We didn't give our other kids one until they were in, I think, middle school, like eighth, seventh or eighth grade, which was still a lot later than just about everyone else around them. But yeah, I would do that a lot later. My youngest daughter actually moved to a flip phone of her own volition 2 years ago
Well,
because she recognized, she said it's distracting to me. She's like, when I'm with my friends, every one of us has our face in their phone. She realized that she wasn't experiencing what was going on around her in a positive way. And
hmm.
so she came home and said, hey, I want to move to a flip phone, which was a little weird too, because we, kind of got used to Life 360, right? We knew where she was all the time. And that was because she had a smartphone. So we had to kind of get uncomfortable by going, okay, that I recognize why that would probably be good for you. It eliminates this thing that makes life really comfortable for us because we know where you are every second of every day because of your smartphone. We had to be willing to give that up, which we did. Um, and she kind of, got us, got her a flip phone. She kept the other thing and basically uses it like an iPod, right? It works on Wi-Fi at home, but she's choosy about when she uses it and doesn't. But when she's gone, when she's out of the house, she doesn't have it with her.
Mm.
And so she's, and she says, like, I am so much more engaged with the world around me since I've done that. It's
Did
pretty
she?
amazing.
Yeah, I love that as a gesture and like taking initiative again and having almost the courage, I suspect would be there's a degree of courage compared to all your friends doing it a certain other way, right?
Yeah.
Is there any chance, was it just her or were there perhaps a group of her friends that all started? I was just wondering if this is happening across
Yeah.
that generation a little bit, that awareness of our whole life
Yeah.
might be stolen by the digital arena if we don't take
Hmm.
ownership of it, and how often or common this is.
It was just her and her group of friends, but it is happening, right? There are people out, like, the way she got the idea was she had seen like multiple people on YouTube
Hmm.
doing digital detoxes, right? Like, okay, I'm going to put my smartphone away for 30 days, right? Or I, switched to a flip phone, and they were talking about this same thing. And that's where she got the idea from. It was like, hey, I think that, like, I'm recognizing that's happening to me too. This is something I should think about doing. So, and I haven't gotten rid of mine, which I would love to get rid of mine. It's unfortunately, like, for work and stuff like that, it's kind of a necessity. I wish there was some way we could get rid of email and all that crap, but I have become a lot more intentional about social media. I mostly post and ghost. I don't, I used to spend a lot of time, like I've been on Instagram for 30 minutes just brainlessly watching stuff. I don't do that anymore. I used to spend a lot more time on YouTube. I do that very little now. I try to, when I'm feeling bored, I try to get up and go outside and shoot my bow. I try to do something as opposed to numbing my brain with digital media, which is what I think most people are doing. I think that's why most people are doing it. They're bored, and they've kind of been, like you said, they've been trained. If you saw The Social Dilemma, so anybody hasn't seen it, it's, there's an entire body of science behind what social media companies do to basically wire your mind to keep doing this stuff over and over and over, right? There's no, like, oh, Instagram is something cool, I like it. It's literally based on science. They know how to trigger things that make you want to do this more and more and more, because the longer they keep you on there, the more they can sell ad space, the more money they can make. It's
Exactly.
And the people who have started these companies, a lot of them, are now advocates against them because they recognize what they do and they were part of developing that whole thing.
Yeah, indeed. I just saw just a partial interview with Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist out of
Yeah.
Stanford. You probably know the
Yeah.
name. And he was, he was describing kind of how the field of neuroscience is. We didn't understand the brain maybe 30 years ago like we do today, and now there's people, biohackers, and everybody just dialing things in. Well, that greater awareness of how the brain works now is being capitalized, of course, by systems called, advertising platforms. And
Yeah.
so, of course, it's almost another version of this is going to happen down the road, or, there's going to be good and bad unfolding throughout history. So I was kind of coming back to, what do you feel like you taught your kids, or what does your daughter, I'm just thinking, what does she have that you've granted her, revealed to her, equipped her with to make such a wise decision in the face of conformity? Or, that's an option too, just conform. What have you,
Yeah.
how did you do that, Eric?
Well, I met my older daughter's the same way. She spends very little time on social media. Now, she's got 3 young kids, but I know people who have kids who, are on social media all the time. My wife doesn't spend a lot of time on social media. My son, he probably spends more time on it than anybody, but he's got like a big page that has to do with college football, and he wants to be a sports media guy, and so that's kind of his job, going to be his job. But I'd say, I think probably the thing that we did the most was we taught our kids to think. We really tried to challenge their thought processes as they grew up about things. We weren't afraid if they thought something that we didn't think was right. We, instead of saying that's wrong, you can't do that, whatever, we would say you can't do it if we didn't think they should. But we always wanted to try to have a conversation with them about that. I think that's something that my wife is naturally a lot better at than I was. I was much more of a draw the line, be done with it, right? And sometimes I would get frustrated with her because I'd be like, you don't need to explain everything to them. But what I realized over time was we complemented each other, because I would be tougher when it needed to happen when she may not have been. But she was really good at engaging their thought processes around their decision making, where I probably would not have been. And I think teaching them how to think, whether it was challenging a thought process that maybe we didn't agree with, or even if it was a thought process that we would look at and we thought, okay, that isn't fully developed. Like, they might say something and we would be like, well, maybe that's right, but why do you think that? Right. And then make them work their way through that. Like, why do I think that?
Yeah.
Why, like, where did I reach that conclusion? And then when they get to that point, instead of us saying, we think you're right or wrong, saying, okay, do some more homework on that. Like, I think you're making a decision with probably not a whole lot of research. We're not telling you what to think, but what I would challenge you to do is go learn more about that, because I think your decision is uneducated, right? And we would use those words not as, denigration, but like, hey, if you're going to, anything that you make a decision about, you need to be educated about. So I think that's probably what we did better than anything, is we tried to teach our kids to think.
Yes, indeed. And I could see what you mean. If you're constantly giving them the answer, you're actually, again, convenience shows up for me.
Mm-hmm.
You're making it easy for
Right.
them to acquire the answer, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately you're not setting them up for long-term uh, self-reliance. So you were literally guiding them through, like, oh, tell me how you're analyzing it. And I don't know if you're using this exact language, but what's the actual challenge that you're getting at? What's at stake? What are the consequences? Were you dissecting it with them and for them together to show them to see it maybe more clearly? Is that what you're
Well, I mean, lots of times we would say, well, tell me how you got to that conclusion,
perfect? I
and
see.
then that way we would recognize, okay, where's that coming from, right? And then from there, it would lots of times be like, well, what if this, or what if that, right? Or have you considered this? Like, what would happen if, okay, like we would kind of listen to their hypothesis and then say, well, okay, if that's true, then how does X come into play? So
Perfect.
lots
Yeah.
of times it was situational, and just kind of presenting them with different things that challenge their line of thought to
Mm.
make them consider those things, so that they could, learn how to see things from a broader perspective and not be very kind of myopic and tunnel vision about a decision making process that they had.
Yep.
And I think that probably more than anything was really helpful, because all of them, as they've gotten older, have told us that most of their friends don't think the same way they do.
Mm.
And sometimes the older ones have sometimes would come back and be like, why do you think I think like this, but my friend doesn't think that way? Or like, as they were in college or whatever, or why, I saw such and such a happen, or I heard someone such say this thing. This is what I think. I can't believe these people think this. Like, why would they think that? Right. And then we would have a good conversation about, okay, how did you get to that conclusion? What knowledge do they have? How did they get to that conclusion? Or are they just regurgitating something that somebody else said and they're not thinking about it? And that was, again, just another way to kind of reiterate to them, like, you need to think everything through, and you need to look at all the different, and sometimes that meant, like, for us, um, especially with my younger daughter, she goes to a school that's pretty liberal. My other three kids all went to school in the state of South Carolina. Yes, there's some liberal mentality, on college campuses, but by and large, on a southern campus in the state of South Carolina, most of the kids there are pretty conservative. My younger daughter went to a school up in North Carolina where a lot of the kids are from the Northeast, completely different mindset. Um, and so she got challenged with a lot of different perspectives. And there was a little bit of a fear on our part, like, okay, will she go up there and kind of buy into all this, thought process that these people are bringing that she hasn't been exposed to? And it actually ended up being the exact opposite. She
Mm.
went up there, and some of the things that we used to say, that she would kind of like, oh, you're, whatever. Like, she would kind of think we were overly conservative, or we were overly this or overly that. And because she thought our thought processes were, she kind of labeled them as stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
Whether they were political in nature or whatever, but they're pretty well thought out on our part. Like, we're the same way. We try to process all this stuff, think all this stuff through. She didn't really recognize that until she got around people who thought very differently than we did, and really processed all of it. And then she came back and would say to us, I'm really surprised, but this thing that you used to say that I kind of thought was whatever, she's like, now I see why you thought that. Right. And I'm, okay, so why do you think that? Well, because I was talking to so and so who's from New Jersey, and they say ABC, but they don't even think about it just because their mom said ABC, and they don't have any knowledge around it. Like, I start having a conversation with them and ask them, like, okay, why do you think that? And they can't even answer that question. And she's like, I can't believe when I ask somebody why they think something, they can't answer the question, right? So it actually was good for her because she got to see a lot of the stuff that she's seen online in real life. And when she started asking questions about why people thought like that, they couldn't answer them. And so she was like, oh, wow, maybe that doesn't have as much validity as I thought it might have. So
Yeah.
it's actually been really good for her because it's helped her solidify and really identify her belief system as her own, because now she's lived in a very conservative household, but she's also lived on a very liberal campus, and she's
Mhm.
been surrounded by two completely different schools of thought, and she's had the opportunity to decide what are my own system of beliefs, not my parents, not the people living in the room with me, like what these are mine.
It's amazing to think about we said the word think like a billion times in the last 10 minutes, by the way. So it's kind of funny, but it's funny to think, or it's interesting to think about what we want our kiddos to become is deep thinkers. We don't care what they think necessarily. We want them to think deeply. And if they leave the house thinking deeply and knowing how to do that tactically, as you just, then there's a really good chance they'll find their way. They'll sort it out. And then
I
the
bet if you asked 100 people off the street, what do you really want for your child to be able to do when they grow up?
hmm,
How many people do you think would say, I want them to be able to think well, to be a deep
yeah,
thinker, to be able to, and be
not
able
a
to,
ton, but I think some people who, if you really if you studied that question, I think it's fair. A lot of people would eventually get to that. You know what? Out of everything, I want them to be happy. I want them to feel loved, but I want them to be critical thinkers. A good amount of people would admire that notion. But to your point, how many people are truly doing that purposefully and
right.
equipping deep
Hmm.
thinkers? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the competitive opportunity here as someone in this day and age raising kids is to teach them to truly be deep thinkers. And if we do that, the rest of the world will more or less sort itself out over time. I've just felt it was so interesting that I don't know if that's all true, by the way. This is all just like theory, I suppose, but the act of helping your kids think more deeply, what you were really doing, you were taking on almost a coaching mindset, right? You never tell a coaching client, say, the answer. You reveal to them possibilities and they have to take ownership, right, of the next steps. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I was just doing that the other day. I was like literally doing a long ruck Saturday morning in the woods. And one of my clients texted me and like, hey, do you have a couple minutes? Which I don't usually like to work on the weekend, but I was
yeah,
like,
right.
okay. Um, and it was a situation with an employee, and he was just kind of riffing, but and then I just started asking him questions, not giving him the answer, like you said. I was asking him questions because I wanted him to consider different things, right? And ultimately, I'm going to give him my advice at the end of that conversation. But in the
Sure.
beginning, I want him to think.
Right. And your role for your client and for your kids has been to help them to achieve clarity in decision making, in making smart
Hmm.
decisions, and making
Hmm.
assessments. Because I want us all to think deeply, but we do eventually have to make assessments of the world and make conclusions. And
Yeah.
maybe we hold them lightly and gracefully, or we recognize, well, we don't have all the information, so we're gonna make some assumptions too, but we make conscious assumptions. We can't live in thinking mode all
Analyze.
the time.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can't be in analytical land. I mean, that's
yeah,
it's a skill, and ultimately, it's a tool you have to use.
yeah.
To allow you to move forward in certain parts of your life, right? Otherwise, you're just being constant analysis.
Truly, truly. So you've taught them uh, to analyze and think deeply, and it sounds like they're all drawing on it in their own unique ways. I was just kind of thinking, segueing a little bit into your coaching role with some of your clients, and I know sounds like from what I've learned from you, your consulting business, a lot of business operations for uh, surgeons and private practitioners. And then there's a certain subset of those people who go, you know what? I know in order my business is running well, but in order for me to level up so that then my business ultimately levels up, I got to work on myself. So, I mean, from a vantage as a men's coach, and maybe you're not exclusively men, but I feel like you are. Is that right?
No, I've actually got probably half my clients are women.
Okay, cool. Even
Actually,
better.
more than half right now.
Either way, high performing
Yeah,
professionals,
these are like high performing women. Hmm.
high
Yeah,
performing,
all
and
entrepreneurs, all practice owners.
what percentage are
Actually, like
parents, would you say?
all of them.
There we go.
Hmm.
So possible to be a parent, high performing business person, uh, solid partner with your spouse, and constantly adding value to the world. Fair to say that's all possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. With that in mind, I mean, what are you seeing as what's the most worthy thing to be attuned to as we're trying to level up our own worlds? As you're seeing other people, they're running into certain obstacles. Are there any themes in what they are overcoming or that they need to overcome? Are there any, universal principles that are worth a father like myself, fresh out the gate, trying to be a high performer in my business, trying to build a great rapport with my wife, trying to raise Leonidas intentionally? And what are the best practices, I suppose, or the key pitfalls that I should be
Yeah.
tuned into?
Um, I mean, so one of the biggest pitfalls that I see, and I'm constantly making sure that I'm checking myself on this too, right? Is the older we get, the more we start to um, make assumptions based upon our previous experiences that we often use as shortcuts to decision making, right? It kind of comes back to this thing we were just talking about with our kids of really thinking through an entire situation. And one of the biggest things that I see, especially new business owners do poorly when they're dealing with employees, is they react to things emotionally based upon previous experience. So, an employee's not doing something they want to do, they automatically assume they know why because somebody else did the same thing when they were a resident or when they were in college with that person or whatever, right? They default to an assumption around a specific situation. And that may be around an employee, it may be around a decision they're going to make, with whatever, buying a $200,000 piece of equipment that they think is going to make them a bunch of money or whatever. And they make a lot of decisions around assumptions. And those assumptions are typically based on past experience, right or wrong, right? They may have had that same experience 4 or 5 times and dealt with it wrong every time. But because they've done it every time, that's their default, and that's kind of the way they keep doing it. And so one of the biggest things that I again challenge my clients to do is really stop, look at every component, whatever is going on around this process of making this decision, and evaluate it, right? And then make an informed decision, whatever it is. And don't let your autopilot be the thing that drives the majority of your decision making process as a business owner. And I would say the same thing as a parent. It's very easy when you have, and what you'll recognize is, as Leonidas gets older and older, is he'll make the same, he'll develop a specific personality, and he'll have certain things that he does that you really love, and he'll have certain things he does that drive you freaking insane, right? And once he does those over and over and over, your default will be like, I know why you're doing that. I know why you're doing that,
Mm.
right? And maybe he is, or maybe he's not. But that's our human nature, is that once we've experienced something multiple times, then we start to believe we know why it's happening, as opposed to looking at every situation with a clear, fresh set of eyes. And I think that's one of the best things that we can make ourselves do as an entrepreneur, as a parent, as a spouse. I've been guilty of doing that both with my kids and with my wife. I try to like constantly remind myself as a husband, okay, if she does something that bugs you, right, don't automatically assume you know why she did that, right? Because it looks the exact same as something that happened 6 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago or whatever that like pissed you off, but it may be happening for a completely different reason, but I'm assuming that it's happening because of the same thing that made it happen before, right? And then I get upset about it, or I get cranky and I start acting different towards her, which is not, the way that I'm taught that I should love her, right? Like she and I always talk about loving each other well. Like
Mm.
that's one of the things in my prayer life every morning is like I ask God to help me love her well, like to help us love each other well. And that a big part of that is being understanding, compassionate, and not assuming that I know why she's doing something, because I think that assumption process gets us into trouble a lot, because if I assume that she's doing something for a reason that upsets me, my emotions are going to elevate really quickly. I'm going to get mad or get upset really fast. And then I'm going to start treating her differently, which then is going to make her upset. And now I've created a dynamic that may not even have needed to happen if I would have seeked to understand. Right. And so that, to me, that's one of the biggest things that I think we can all be better at. That is the difference between us. I think it can be a huge differentiator, whether you're an entrepreneur, an employer, husband, father, like the difference between that scenario of, assuming and then letting that dictate your actions versus seeking to understand. You're a completely different person in those two scenarios.
Absolutely. It's poetic, and I know it's Stephen Covey's habit number 5: seek first to understand, then be
Mm-hmm.
understood. So it's timeless wisdom, but why is it so hard? I was just thinking about this as you were positing this value of taking inventory of our assumptions and recognizing assumptions rule the world. Assumptions rule the
Yeah.
world, and it's our
Yep.
awareness, our conscious awareness of them that'll help us navigate the world, so to speak. But some people, I was just thinking with my wife and I even, if she says something a certain way and I assume the meaning behind it, then I can get either on the wrong path, I could get triggered.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I don't have time to check my assumption. Like what are we're so in a hurry to get somewhere in life or to acquire everything and achieve that we just don't have time to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I'm just trying to get.
I, I
Why
think
don't we?
I think it's this. I think it's we're selfish.
Mm,
I think innately we are ingrained to think of ourselves first. It's the
mm,
self, and it's you did something that just emotionally I'm responding to, because my first thought is not about you, it's about me,
yeah.
right? And so the better we become at recognizing and trying to think about that other person before we think about ourselves, which I fail at all the time, but I'm a lot better at it now than I was even a couple of years ago, and so is my wife. The more that we recognize the other person at least as equally as much as we recognize ourselves, or but preferably first, the less we will make assumptions.
So true, and yet still challenging. So yeah, as you just said, that
That's
maybe
not easy.
yeah, I was going to say it's not as though one day we will operate without any assumptions. We'll have the full truth and nothing but the truth always, and everyone will
Mm-hmm.
be aligned. That's never going to happen. But
No.
can we catch ourselves? Can we notice ourselves getting tripped up by our assumptions and our maybe our selfishness from time to time more often and adjust? And I think even naming, if I'm picturing my wife and I misunderstanding, we get off in a tangent, maybe there's some tension. I think it's almost defusing the situation if you name, gosh, I just realized I'm operating under the following assumption. It's probably not even correct. And then
Mm-hmm.
that can settle the space up a bit for you to recalibrate on what the act, what are both parties' assumptions? Are any of those useful, by the way, or true? And then omit the ones that aren't, and then recalibrate. So it's being aware of assumptions, it's naming assumptions, and it's actually some assumptions are necessary. Sometimes we don't have all the information, so we just have to say, Eric, you and I are going to build this business. What are our operating assumptions that we have to use until we either can get more facts or we
Right.
get more experience?
Yeah.
But
But
otherwise,
all that stuff you just said, like to do any of that requires a willingness to give up the self, right?
true.
It requires a willingness to not be by nature selfish
Hmm.
and have everything be about ourselves. That's that's the biggest step there is, because if you can get past that part and get past the, the, Freud called it the the ego or the id. There's two
Mhm.
different components, right? But it's kind of the autopilot. It's all about me, self gratification, self fulfillment, all that stuff. But if you can get past that and be willing to humble yourself, because especially as men, I think it's hard to ever say I was wrong, or to not immediately assume that we know what's going on, or seek to fix. That's another thing that we do like really badly and poorly as husbands. Is half the time my wife just wants me to listen to her,
Yep.
and I'm constantly in like, okay, how do I solve that problem? And then I go into like, well, why don't you do this, or let's do this, or whatever, and I'm just annoying the piss out of her because she really just wants me to listen. you
Timeless.
know
This is great.
yeah.
It's timeless.
And so, like what, and I still don't do this well. I'm trying to do it better, but like now, if I recognize my own, like where my brain is going, I will literally just say, are you looking for me to help you find a solution, or do you want me to listen? And that helps a ton, because a lot of times she'll be like, I just want you to listen, and I'll be like, okay, now I know what you're looking for. Right. But I don't remember to do that all the time. But when I do, the conversation is always a ton more productive. Because then sometimes she'll say, yes, I do want you to help me find a solution. Okay, now I know what I'm tasked with.
Yeah, indeed. No, that, but it's funny. I just joke about this, but yeah, it's timeless that we just want to fix things. But the safe
Mm-hmm.
assumption probably would be the new status quo would be to flip it and say, no, they just need to be heard. That 9.9 times out of 10, that's the role I need to step into
Yeah,
when it comes to spouse, I would imagine.
yeah. But again, it's when we try to fix it, are we making it about them, or are we making it about us?
Yeah, interesting.
Right? We're making it about us, because the faster we can fix it, the faster she can be happy and we can be comfortable again.
Right, no doubt. And then going down, not we won't go down the rabbit hole, but you can be like, being selfish is probably a survival instinct in a sense. It serves society well, or it
Oh,
serves,
sure.
there's
Yeah.
value to that we don't necessarily want to,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to null and void all of self-mindedness, but we want to be stewards of our self and the
Yeah.
moment, and we want to, so just being aware
Be
of things like
thoughtful.
this, to
Just
be
being
thoughtful.
thoughtful and self-aware.
Yeah. So give me your assessment quickly of the role of fatherhood over the next, in this coming generation and the next 2 or 3 generations. Your kids are, on their way, and your role as father is still important, of course, they're relying on you, and you'll always be their
Mm-hmm.
dad, but your sculpting is mostly done, if not done. Is that fair? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, you would think so, right? Like that's kind of what I always thought when my kids were younger. But all you're doing if is you end up sculpting them in a different way. It's
Okay.
almost like when they're younger, let's equate it to a chunk of marble, right? And when they're kids, you're taking off big chunks of that marble to form the shape.
Mm,
And when they're adults, you're shaving off little tiny pieces to fine tune what it ends up looking like.
okay.
And I
Yeah.
think if you do a good job with them in terms of your communication patterns, when they get older, they'll keep talking to you. They'll keep coming back to you and asking you what you think about something. They'll keep looking for guidance, right? If you're overbearing and you make their life really difficult, and you don't really engage them in the thought process, and you're just a dictator, then they're probably not going to come back and ask you a whole lot, because they didn't really get a lot from you to begin with. But like I can just think about the last 24 hours. My older son was on the phone talking to my wife about something. He had gone out to Oregon, and he's in nursing school now here in Carolina, but he had gone out to Oregon for something, and he was kind of going through this whole thought process he had around this thing he was thinking about potentially doing. My younger son texted me last night because he's interviewing for this job, and he was sending a communication to this guy who interviewed him once and was trying to get a follow-up interview. And he's like, how does this email sound? Would you word it differently? Like, how would this look if you sent this off to this guy? My older daughter was on the phone with my wife, and something about her kids, right? Like, one of her youngest is like being a nightmare, and they're talking about, my wife does a better job of coaching him through it than she does because she's seen it so many times, it's driving her crazy. And then my youngest daughter is like texting us both on this like string with the three of us about what's going on. She's volunteering at Girls State, which is this thing in South Carolina, and have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so.
So they 1 to 2 girls from every school in the state get selected to go. It's like highly competitive, and they take them and they form a mock government, all these girls, right? Like, and then they can choose to like run for Senate, they can choose to run for House, they can choose to be a mayor, but they have to all work together to make this government work. And then at the end of the week, they can any kid they want can propose a bill, right? But they have to go out and present it to the entire group of girls, which is like, I think like 400 or 500 girls. And at the end, the entire group votes on which bills they think are worthy. And then the last day, they actually get to go to the South Carolina State House. And if they're in the House on a girl state, they get to present their bill to the actual House of Representatives in South Carolina. If they're in the Senate, they get to present it to the actual Senate. And if it's really, really good, they'll adopt it and they'll push it through as a state like law.
For real,
right?
I see.
Yeah, for real. It's like a life-changing thing. My daughter was selected to go as a senior in high school, and it gave her this level of confidence coming out of it. She had like formed bonds with these girls. She still talks to them all the time, and she's volunteered the last 2 years to go back to serve like these other girls that are coming through. And every year she goes, it's like fills her, right? Because it's so empowering. And she's there right now, and she like texts us and like, oh, such and such happened last night, and this girl came up to me and talked to me, and like how she's like pouring into these kids. And it's just like, in a period of 24 hours, every one of our adult kids was talking to us about something important to them, right? So it doesn't end if you do it right, I don't think.
Beautifully said. And dude, I'm so happy to know that you have these rich relationships now with your kids. Like, what a testament to the hard work. And it was the first time you were a dad. It was the first time you were a dad, and you were just sorting it out. And here you are now with a great result from that. And so second to last question, and then I'll send us.
Well, let me say this too. I was
yeah.
just going to say that for people that listen. It may sound like it's all like, wine and roses. There was lots of stuff in there that was not. Okay. Lots, like legal stuff, law stuff, like kids hanging out with the wrong people stuff, like lots of stuff that was ugly. And at the time, mama thought we may lose that child forever. I thought I may not want that kid to ever come back. But the one thing we never stopped doing was talking. We never stopped communicating. And even when we said, you are not living the way you were raised to live, like the decisions you were making are not the decisions that you were taught to abide by. Like, you're compromising the way you're living your life. Even when we thought that, we still talked to them, and we still tried to get them to look at it from a different perspective. And the one thing that they've all said as they've come through those times is, like, when I was in the middle of that, even though I was really, really upset with you, I always knew you were still there. And I knew half the time that I was doing something wrong. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. But, you always taught me to live a certain way. And at a certain point, I wanted to live up to that expectation. So don't ever like sell that short, because you're going to go through seasons with your kids. So you may have perfect kids all the way through, and you may have two of them that like everything is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how amazing that is. And you may have one or two of them that you're like, how did that happen? I raised them the exact same way. But ultimately, every one of them is their own person, and they're all going to make decisions of their own volition. And some of them have to like go learn the hard way. But I think if you raise them well and they know that they can trust you, at some point they'll come back.
Damn, dude. Yeah, I don't know anyone getting well, who knows what people are getting, but the impression that it wasn't necessarily hard, definitely not the case. But we didn't really get into you know, the reality of things, a lot of high level big ideas, but I know
Yeah, part
there's
B.
no, there's no
I got
guarantee.
lots of stories.
Yeah, right. There are no guarantees it's going to be easy or not messy. But I'm
No.
hearing one of the best practices, no matter what, as hard as it gets or as ugly as it gets, is continue to have conversations with your kids. And to they may we're just thinking about our role for them. You know, there's going to be a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the world as a kid in this day and age, or really any, growing up. There's just a lot of variability and uncertainty and making sense of the world. And the one thing that can be consistent is the parents, and they can be there. And that, talk a little bit about presence and being present in the moment, but there's almost a different version of presence that I'm hearing, like being present for your kids no matter what, and being committed to them, even when maybe they're not committed to themselves. Um, that
Yeah.
pays
And
dividends.
that doesn't mean compromising what you believe either, right? I have seen people that I know with older kids who were making really bad decisions, and because they couldn't stand to watch what the potential outcome of those decisions were, basically, I don't want to say they blessed it, right? But okay, let's say um, so and so's son is like an active user of drugs and is dealing with, illegal drugs and whatever. And well, I'm so afraid something's going to happen to them. Move back in with me, right? I let them move back into my house. Like I know somebody that did that, and that kid didn't change how they were behaving, right? They just had a free place to live while they did it, right? I mean, that's one thing. We never did those. Like we had older kids and there were times where, they may have been doing something that we didn't agree with, or we were like, we knew they needed our help. And we were always willing to give it, but we never excused the behavior, and we never enabled it. We never said, hey, if you're gonna make that choice, we were always like, you're gonna live with the consequence, right? We'll always love you. We will always be here. You're never gonna get disowned by your parents. But if that's the choice you're gonna make as an adult, then you are going to live with that choice. Like that's one of the things that, and I haven't even mentioned this, but we've said this to our kids since their entire time they've grown up. Every choice you make has a consequence. And the word consequence has a connotation of negativity, but consequences can be good too. So when you make a choice, you're going to have a consequence. It's a good one or it's a bad one, but you have to live with the consequence of that decision. Whether you're 8, 12, 20, 30, we've taught them that their whole life. Whatever choice you make, that is a choice that you own, and the consequence that comes from that choice is your own. And as you get older, those consequences become bigger. They come, what kind of job do you get? How much money do you make? How is your relationship with your wife? What does that mean when you're raising your kids? What kind of life do you want to live? What's your faith look like? All those things, every choice they make has a consequence. But we raised our kids to understand that nothing just happens to them.
Indeed.
Their life is a series of consequences that came from their choices. And we've had them, we've had kids who were in some really bad places. And at times we're like, I can't believe that this is what my life looks like right now. Like this, I'm like, my friend is blah, blah, blah. And, we were like very honest with them. Said, hey, the reason your life looks like this is because you made this choice, and then you made this one, and then you made this one, and then you made this one. You didn't just end up there, right? That was a series of choices you made. Your friend is over there because she did A, B, C, and D, and those were all good choices. But guess what? You cannot be there 6 months from now if you start making good decisions. But it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to crawl out of it the same way you crawled into it, slowly, through a series of good decisions instead of a series of bad decisions. And that's, where they are now. But that's, you can't, you have to let them, again, back to the beginning of our conversation, you have to let them struggle, and figure out how to do that well, because that's life.
No doubt. And you can communicate the concept that choices have implications and consequences. Some are good, some are bad. But then you need to trust that they're gonna have to learn the hard way a little bit, this through the struggle and all that. So it's just funny
You
how
have to have the courage. You have to have the courage as a parent to do that.
that's the truth. It truly is an act of courage just to trust the process, not just to trust, but you're doing the fundamentals and then you're letting things unfold and you're guiding them through whatever the reality is that shows up for them.
Yeah,
And it's going to
that's
be,
the
yeah, it's going to be case by case. I'm just trying to think right now. We feel stuck.
that's the really hard part. Like, you, there have been times with, like, some of our older kids where, we have said things to them that were honest, but they didn't want to hear, or have not given them something that they wanted when they were in a really difficult situation, that has caused them to, like, not talk to us for months.
Mm,
But it was a principled decision, and we felt like,
mm,
if we don't make principled decisions, how can we expect our kids to? And so, again, they got there because of choices that they made and the consequences of those choices. And we were always honest with them about that. And if they didn't like to hear that, sometimes their pride kept them from, communicating with us. But then we would literally say the exact same thing to them that I just said to you, right? Like, guess what? You can get out of that situation, but you're going to have to do something different than what you're doing right now. And eventually, over time, they realized that. And when they did, the first person that they came back to ask for advice on how to make those decisions was usually their mama, because mama's easier to talk to than dad is. But then it would turn into a family conversation, and I'd be involved in it too.
You just put such a nice bow on it all. I'm glad you jumped in because our duty perhaps is to show them how to make principled decisions so that they
Mm-hmm.
become great citizens of, of the world, of the nation.
Yeah.
And in order for them to make principled decisions, they have to see us make principled decisions.
Yeah,
As hard as
man.
it is, it's
Exactly
gonna
right.
it's gonna be. No, I'm so glad this is being highlighted here because right now, being a father is a dream. He's only 20 months. It's just his imagination.
Sure.
It's all play.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Perfect.
Showing him the woods and adventure and rivers and lakes and we took him to his first concert here at a place called Red Rocks here in Colorado, which is a big outdoor
Yeah.
auditorium, massive place that so we're showing him his first and stuff, but there will come a time where I have to make a really hard decision and take a
Mm-hmm.
path that's going to create disruption in my
Yeah.
currently blissful fatherhood experience.
Yeah.
Um,
What if he calls you from jail at 22?
Seriously.
Mm-hmm. I've been there.
So,
But I also did the same thing to
yeah,
my dad.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
there's no way you can predict what's going to happen. He
yeah,
also
you
may
can't map it all out.
sail through life and be, summa cum laude, and, graduate and go to med school, and, never make a decision that, other than who he dates or anything like that, that makes your life difficult. You just don't, you literally have no idea.
Ready for anything. We have to be ready for
Hmm.
anything.
But I think
Gosh,
what you just said is, if you make principled decisions, if you live a life of integrity, and if you model for them, what you expect them to be when they grow up, that's a North Star that they will always come back to. They may make bad decisions at certain points in their life, but they'll always gravitate back towards that because they recognize that that's a place of strength, and it's a place of safety. And that when they become mature and they start to think maturely, they'll recognize like that's how I live the way I want to live.
Hmm.
They will come back to that.
Man, it almost simplifies it even further. It's like the best way to raise a future-proof kid is to give them someone to to emulate that's worthy of emulating. And not I'm going to be flawed, don't get me wrong. There's going to be, but for the most part, can I give them an example of how to live well in order for them to live well?
Yeah. Yep. Be the man that your daughter, says the guy that I marry has to be this good, and be the man that your son says when I become a husband, I need to be this good.
Hmm.
Be that guy.
That clicks. Eric, final question, big idea. This is, I don't know, take a few moments of deep breaths as I lay this question down for you, considering everything we've covered. But I want you to picture a time, maybe it's 30 years down the road, and you've got your kids. You're nowhere to be found. You're off probably killing elk and deer and doing something fun, adventurous. But they're sitting around a
Oh,
campfire.
that age.
They're sitting around a campfire, reminiscing about your role as their father, and weaving tales about Mr. Eric Wilson. What do you think are not what do you think, what do you hope are the three big themes that are coming out of their mouths as they tell tales that you want to be known for?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, well, as they tell tales, that's so that could be a lot different than the conversation that we just had, because within the context of all this really serious stuff, like our family has a really fun time together.
There we go.
Um,
That's good.
when you put everybody in the same place, it's loud. Um, there's a lot of laughter. Um, there's a lot of movie quotes. That's probably one of the biggest things in our family is like everybody, like my kids all have these things that they'll spit out that are all private inside jokes among them, right? Something from SpongeBob or something from Talladega Nights or something from like some movie that we all like watch every year together.
Yeah.
They'll like we it's a lot of people haven't even seen this movie, but you remember that movie with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, Daddy's Home?
Okay.
So there's a second one called Daddy's Home 2 that also has Mel Gibson and somebody else in it, and it's like hilarious. It's like this movie we all watch together every Christmas. And there's this one part in it where the good grandpa like shows up and he's like, "Hey kids," and he tells them like some stupid duck joke, and everybody's laughing. And then the other grandpa walks in who hasn't been there for like 4 years, and he goes, he's jealous because that other guy told a joke, and he's like, "I got one for you, kids. Two dead hookers wash up on a beach," and everybody's like, and so now it's like if we're in a room and we're like somebody else is telling jokes, like one of the family, like one of the kids will be like, "I got one for you. Two dead hookers wash up on a beach," and everyone just like erupts in laughter. Like
Great.
so, when they're sitting around telling tales, I hope that they will. One of them will be that that I taught them how to laugh, because I'm kind of my wife's a little bit more the serious one in the relationship. I'm the one who does like goofy, stupid stuff that like
Good.
to a certain point embarrasses her. Um, when they were young, which I know this is not politically correct, but when they were young and we used to drive through the drive-through, I would always have a different ethnic voice that I would use. Like sometimes I was like an Indian guy. Sometimes I would talk like I was from the hood. Sometimes I would talk with a British voice. And I would order like that, and everyone they'd all be snickering in the back, and then we'd pull up to the window, and I'm like this, white like redheaded guy who looks like he's from Denmark or something, and the person getting the food would be looking at me like, "Did you just talk with an accent?" And then I'd speak with the same voice, and then the drive-through person would start laughing. So I used to do that all the time. So we just kind of do goofy stuff, and they talk like they just say that all like we'll be at a family gathering, and so one of the kids will be like, "Remember when we were at McDonald's and you were talking like an Indian and they couldn't understand what you said?" And they'd all start laughing and stuff. So I think one is hopefully I taught them how to laugh. and how to not take life too seriously. I hope that the second one is that they learned that nothing is too hard to take on. I think that is something that every one of my kids at one point or another has said to me is one of the best things that I've ever learned from you is that there's really, really hard things that most people aren't willing to do that you can still do if you figure out A, how to attack it, and B, you like have the tenacity to do it every day until you get there. And some of my kids are better at it than others, but all of them have seen that in me and know that I believe there's nothing they can't do if they are willing to do a little bit every day, which I know you and I talked about earlier. I think that's one of the biggest things that separates people who are successful from those who aren't. And then I'd say the third one is that that I did a really good job of loving their mom, because I want them to be good wives and good husbands. And then the last one is that and that I was a man of God, and that I didn't just say it, but that they saw it. And I've done a much better job of that the last 4 or 5 years. I always took my kids to church. I always, talked to them about the importance of their faith. But, the last few years I've been much more like every morning I spend 45 minutes in the Word. Like my daughter, before she went to college, she'd get up and start and get ready for school. And she's like, how long have you been up? And I've been like, I've been up since, 4:45. And she knew I was doing my Bible study early. And now she's a freshman in college, and she gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning, does her Bible study, goes to the gym. And she said specifically, like, I saw you do it, and my day got super, super busy up here at college because I couldn't control everything. She's also an athlete. And she's like, so I started doing it. Like, she actually called me. I remember, I think it was close to winter, like close to the end of her first semester. And she's in a sport. And so like she had practice at night every day. And she's like, I'm not getting my workouts in. I'm not like getting my Bible study in. She's like, how did you make yourself get up in the morning? Because she knew I used to love to sleep. And I just kind of told her, I was like, it's going to be miserable for the first 30 days. But if you can get through a month, just make yourself do it. It'll become easy. And we had this like hour-long conversation about, and then the next morning, she did it the next morning. And she texted me at like 5:15 and goes, I'm up. It was just so like cool, it was like this moment where I was like, I realized what a difference you can make.
Damn. Well, it sounds like we know this as almost a law of the universe. Our kids will learn from us and potentially emulate us one way or the other. And it sounds like you've lived a life worth emulating, and now your kids have a path to follow if they choose. It's still up to them, but
yeah. Well, I've gotten better at it, which I think that requires us to be introspective, right? And to constantly examine ourselves and be willing to admit our own deficiencies. And I have had a lot of deficiencies, and I still have a lot of room to grow. But I think we always have to constantly be willing to look in the mirror. As much as we ask our kids to look at themselves in the mirror, we have to be willing to do the same thing.
Indeed. Mr. Eric Wilson, thank you for your time.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me on. Good conversation. Thanks so much.
Indeed. We'll catch you on the next one, and thank you for pouring out your fatherhood heart. Good for everybody. We'll see you.
There's not a better job to have. See you, brother.
Peace.
There you have it. I believe the world is calling on us as fathers to step up and be stewards and shepherds of those around us. The times are interesting, and they are demanding more out of us than perhaps we once realized. It's because of that I want to celebrate and honor the ultimate role of fatherhood and set up dads for maximum impact. So thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch the coming episodes. And above all, share this episode with a father you admire. See you on the next one.
Go Dad, here we go now. Oh yeah, the ultimate roll now. Oh yeah, here we go now.